Continue this little conversation that we're having about the changes in the gun laws in the United States. Now, for me, as I've indicated, it's an intellectual exercise. It's just I'm disinterested in the sense that I haven't got a dog in the fight. However, a lot of people have been making comments about the proposed changes, and they've expressed consternation that people like the National Rifle Association seem to be opposed to any modification of the law that comes down the pike, even modifications and changes that a great many people would think were reasonable, sensible, compromise type positions. And people can't understand why the NRA has adopted this policy. They're also incapable of understanding why so many gun owners in the United States of America are equally adamant that they're not going to comply with what on the outside seems reasonable changes. If you've got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be afraid of the law. If you've done nothing wrong, or you're not going to do anything wrong, you shouldn't be concerned about changes to the law. Well, that's kind of the Salem argument, the witch sniffers argument. Answer our questions, answer our interrogation, answer our inquisitors. If you haven't got anything to hide, then you shouldn't be concerned about answering our questions. With the situation in the United States, I'm going to show you a couple of demonstrations and show you how, under the regime that we have in New Zealand, which I think is a reasonable regime, you can still find yourself potentially really in the shit from doing something fairly innocuous, doing something that you weren't even aware that was in breach of the Firearms Act, but potentially could see you in big trouble. I mean, incarceration type trouble. If people in authority choose to enforce the law, manipulate the law in ways that the law wasn't intended to be drafted. So, when I was a kid at school, and I was about 16, I was beaten by one of my teachers. Back in the day, this is going back pre-1980, we were caned at school. Corporal punishment was the norm at the school that I was at. And I managed to escape getting caned until I was in the sixth form. I had a run-in with a very officious little prig of a teacher. Took and disliked me from day one, and I had a series of narrow escapes. He was always pinging me on something, but it wasn't ever something that warranted a beating. And then one day, he got himself... I got myself into a situation that gave him the perfect excuse. I was in the changing rooms after playing rugby. These had just been rebuilt changing rooms, breeze block walls, and I was sitting there idly picking mud off my boots, and I wrote my initials in mud on the wall about this big. So no real challenge to the detective capabilities of this teacher figuring out who had done it. And he flogged me. I got 3 of the best. And we're talking about grown men basically assaulting adolescent boys with a cane. Hurts like hell. Very demeaning, thoroughly unpleasant experience. The guy did it because he wanted to teach me a lesson. I've always had a bit of a problem with authority, and as one of my army reports said, a suicidal tendency to laugh in the face of any authority greater than my own. And he wanted to teach me a lesson, and this was his opportunity. So I got flogged. The nature of the punishment was completely disproportionate to the offence. I remember thinking at the time that this is pretty extreme. And then I was reading a book by Norman Mailer called The Naked and the Dead. It's a very famous book. And in this there's a dialogue between 2 characters. They're talking about the nature of power. And one of the characters is explaining that for power to be effective, it must be applied in a disproportionate fashion. If the punishment fits the offence, it doesn't send the message that the person in power wants it to send. So if you have an opportunity to exercise power, you should do so in a disproportionate manner if you intend to modify or cow the remainder of the group. I'm getting somewhere with this, bear with me. In this country, we have a regime where we have 5 categories of firearms license. Very quickly, very generally, there's the A category, which is bolt-action rifles and shotguns, sporting rifles, hunting rifles, target rifles, that kind of thing. B category is firearms deals with handguns, and that is extremely difficult to get. It's a really onerous process to get a pistol license. Then we move on to the C category, which is what I have that enables me to have machine guns and submachine guns. A D category is the dealer's license, and an E category covers military-style semi-automatics. It's all kind of out of order because you'd think the E category was a little bit further down the food chain, but it's an E category because it was only added on after a mass shooting that we had in New Zealand back in the 1990s. Prior to this, you could own an AR-15, AK clone, self-loading rifle, military-style semi-automatic, what the gun grabbers refer to as assault rifles. You could have one of those on a general firearms ticket, your average Joe Blow firearms license. In the aftermath of the shooting, they changed the law and they created a new category, military-style semi-automatics. I just want to show you something and talk about why people are so sceptical and suspicious of changes in the law. Not so much the law change themselves, but where it's likely to lead in the situations that people can find themselves in. People that were obedient to the law, law-abiding, no problem. One day they make a change to the law and somebody in an official capacity can manipulate that situation to hurt you. Now this is an A category firearm. It is a military self-loader. It's from World War II. It's called an M1 Carbine. It was sold and legally to me because I have an A category firearms license. It was sold because it was sold with a 5-round low capacity magazine. It lacks the salient characteristics of what we have categorized as military style semi-automatic. It doesn't have a flash eliminator, doesn't have a bayonet boss, doesn't have a freestanding pistol grip, and it was sold with a low capacity magazine. So I bought this and I'm able to use it, A category firearms license. Now, I also have an E category firearms license which covers military style semi-automatics. If I put this 15-round magazine on this rifle, I'm not going to do it because if I did, I would be breaking the law. Even though I have an E category and an A category firearms license, if I place this 15-round magazine on this firearm, it does nothing to change any of the features or the mechanical functioning of the weapon. What I have done in the eyes of the law is convert it from an A category to an E category. A categories, as I think I mentioned, are not registered. E categories are. All E category firearms, military style semi-automatics, are registered to an owner. The police have the serial numbers, all that sort of thing. My crime would be, even though I have an E category ticket, this is out there in the ether. It's categorized as an A category firearm. E category has to be registered. The police have to be aware of it. I have to have a permit to procure. There's a whole lot of paperwork that goes with it. The minute I put this on the rifle, I'm breaking the law, even though I have both categories of firearms license. It's kind of a crazy situation, but there it is. Show you something else. Now, before I do that, I just want to explain why I didn't put the magazine on. My arms officers are superb. They're fantastic. Get along with them very well. They've known me for a long time. I've been vetted up the arse. They know I'm a serious collector. They are helpful, cheerful, a joy to be around. There are a couple of arms officers who fortunately I have not had to deal with, but I know by reputation who are little Hitlers. Very, very officious, very, very full of their own authority, and generally, if they can make life difficult for people, they will. Maybe their wife's not putting out, maybe they have a small penis, maybe they're just having a bad day, but generally they are a real pain in the ass to deal with. If I placed that magazine on the firearm and did it and put the video up, I would be making myself very vulnerable to some other dickhead who went, oh, he's just breached the firearms law, and then makes a complaint. The penalty for doing an illegal conversion is jail time. Now, if you think that would never happen, that the police wouldn't bother with that kind of trifling behaviour, you need to think again, because some of them would. We've all had run-ins with officialdom who do things, very unpleasant things, from positions of power, either because they're just thoroughgoing arseholes and it gives them a little pump of self-esteem, they've got a bit of power, or, as quite often happens with the application of the law, it's directed in its most severe form to an individual, not necessarily to punish him, but to send a message to everybody else. The law is employed by the authorities all the time, every single day. They employ the law and apply the law with that objective in mind, to send a message to everybody else that they are in charge, that these things are serious, and the application, as I talked about, this disproportionate application of power is quite deliberate. Quite deliberate. It's intended to cow the group. Now, if somebody who is law-abiding and reasonable and has the licenses can do that act and get themselves into trouble, trust me, the situation gets worse. This is an AR-15. It is a military-style semi-automatic. It's not an assault rifle because it doesn't have a selector switch. Nonetheless, it does have a flash eliminator. No one's ever been killed by a flash eliminator. It has a bayonet boss. I don't believe that drive-by bayonetings are a big deal in the United States, but nonetheless it's one of the characteristics that makes this an evil rifle. A freestanding pistol grip, which has never killed anybody, and a high-capacity magazine. Now I can do this because I have an E-category firearms license. I can take this rifle out, I can shoot it, and I can enjoy it. And we have been in breach of the law so many times it's frightening, because we weren't aware of it. I'll tell you what the situation is. If I take this firearm out and I go out with, say, my friend Tony, who also has AR-15s and an E-category firearms license, and I'm shooting my rifle away, and I say to Tony, here you go mate, have a crack with mine, see how you get on. He takes the rifle and fires a few rounds. We are both guilty of breaking the New Zealand arms regulations, because what we have done is we have transferred a firearm. I have transferred an E-category firearm. As I mentioned before, they are registered, and they're registered to an individual. In order for me to legally allow Tony to fire the rifle, if I followed the letter of the law, he and I would have to go to the police station. I would have to get the police officer there to take the serial number, take the rifle off the records as being registered to me, and put it on Tony's record, his ticket. We'd have to have a bit of paper that we swapped backwards and forwards, called a permit to procure. Then Tony would be able to shoot the rifle because it's registered to him. Giving it back to me so I can take it home, we'd have to go back to the police station and go through that whole palaver to be in keeping with the law. It's a technical breach, but nonetheless it is a breach of the Arms Act. An officious little prat of an arms officer, seeing us or finding us doing that, could bring charges, and we will be charged. We will appear in the newspaper as people who had been charged and were appearing before the courts for a breach of the New Zealand firearms regulations in that they illegally transferred a military-style semi-automatic. Sounds bloody serious, doesn't it? Of course, it's not a big deal. Surely a reasonable person wouldn't think that was justification for bringing criminal charges with a possible sentence of incarceration. And yet all around the world, where the gun grabbers have had an opportunity to fiddle with the laws, they have done precisely that. They have applied the law in its most vigorous manner, out of all proportion to the offence, in order to send a message to everybody else. That is exactly what has happened, and it is exactly why so many of the US gun owners are really paranoid, if you like to think of it in those terms, sceptical, cynical about the intent and how the law will be applied by officialdom. It is the nature of power to seek more power. It is the nature of power and officials that they will make decisions that have nothing to do with the spirit of the law, but have everything to do with the preservation of their authority. Each one of us at some point in our life has come across that kind of little Hitler official. Usually it just makes a good day a bad day, but when you are dealing with firearms and a possible custodial sentence, then things become a little more serious. So I have been sufficiently concerned about what somebody might do with that demonstration when I did not put on the high-capacity magazine. Because you just don't know who's going to be out there watching and how they're going to react to it, and you can find yourself really in the shit. When you haven't really done anything wrong, you can really find yourself up to your eyeballs in the deep doo-doo. So, that's that. I hope that was helpful. Got a few more things to say about these changes, but we'll do that for another video. Hope you're well. Talk to you soon.